So Steven, man, you know, the mega fight everybody's talking about, Spence versus Crawford, man. Just 100% honesty. Are we getting that fight this year?
Look, I'm very optimistic that we are. And if you ask Errol Spence, like we did during the telecast this past Saturday, in the Jim Gray interview, he was very definitive. He's predicting that we will get it this way, and I tend to agree with him. Look, we know there are no network obligations or conflicts. There are no promoter obligations or conflicts. Those are the things that usually mess it up. So now it's just a matter of sort of grinding through the deal, getting to a point where everyone feels like they're being treated fairly. All the details are taken care of. But knowing how bad Errol wants it, knowing how bad Terrence wants it, I think it will happen this year.
Gotcha. Now, I know you're not going to go into details about like negotiations. All of that is always behind closed doors. But just in terms of percentage, is Spence expected to get at least a slightly higher percentage than Crawford based on his pay-per-view sales? He has 3 belts, things of that nature.
Look, there's some arguments. Look, you could certainly say that the belts, that Crawford's got, that Spence has 3, and they get some a bigger split, or that Crawford's Crawford's pay-per-views haven't quite done the numbers that Spence's pay-per-views have done. There are arguments, but you could also look at it and say, like, Crawford's been number 1 pound for pound. He's been a champion longer than Errol. So there's arguments on both sides. I think where we end up is something that's, if it's not 50-50, it's pretty close.
Now, again, be honest with me, man.
Mm-hmm.
When you heard Eddie Hearn say that Triple G versus Canelo was about 10 times bigger than, I already see you smirking, man. 10 times bigger than Spence versus Crawford. How mad were you at that? Were you annoyed by it? And just give me your thoughts on it overall.
No, I think it's funny because at this point, everybody knows his MO. Whatever he does is bigger and better than everything else anybody else does. He's always got opinions on everyone else's work, rarely has self-critical opinions. So, when someone who has that kind of approach, you just kind of got to laugh. If that's what you feel like you got to say to make your event bigger or to make yourself feel more important, that's fine. Boxing fans will speak for it themselves.
What is it about Eddie that seemingly gets under the skin of a lot of promoters and just guys out here in the States, man? What is it? Is it just that he's brash? Like, what is it?
I think it's just the blatant dishonesty. That's what rubs me the wrong way. Like, that's where the friction has been in our relationship. It has nothing to do with losing Joshua or anything like that. I prefer to do business with people who are honest and forthright and have integrity.
In your view, is Spence versus Crawford the biggest fight in boxing now? I know it's a lot of big ones out there.
Look, I think there's probably 3 fights that are in that conversation. I think Tank Ryan Garcia, I think Canelo Charlo, and Spence Crawford. And I would even put, and this is, looking a little bit down the future, I still think Wilder Joshua is one of the biggest fights, in the sport. Assuming Wilder's coming back and assuming Joshua can get by Usyk, I still think that's a massive, massive fight.
I find it interesting that you threw in Charlo versus Canelo. So you think that's actually a bigger fight than Benavidez versus Canelo? They're both big fights, obviously, but do you think Charlo probably has a little bit more star power at this present moment?
No, it's a good point. Whether Charlo, Canelo, I think. Look, there are 2 different fan bases, so I think that adds to it as well. But the reality is, Benavidez, Canelo, a lot of people believe that David Benavidez is the biggest threat to Canelo. So you're probably right. I should add that to the list because I think people will be intrigued by that fight because of his style and his height and his size. I think that's a big challenge for Canelo.
Gotcha. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Okay, you got it.